We've been wanting to recreate an Electro effect from Spider-Man No Way Home and have always loved this shot in particular from one of the moments that we saw in the trailer. Not only does it have a nice framing and vivid colors for a night scene, but also the portrayal of Electro here compared to later shots has a cool supernatural look to it, which we wanted to try and replicate. We also recently released our Electric VFX pack, which we will be using to help create these looks. In our shots, we will use Element 3D for our Electro character and the environments, but the same sort of process will also work if you have shot live plates. In Adobe After Effects, start with a new comp and create a black solid for our background, then duplicate for the Electro character layer and add Element 3D. We've shown how to use Mixamo for Element in previous episodes linked below, but to quickly go through it, we use Mixamo.com, choose their LE character, and download it as an FBX file. Then using Blender, we just altered the model and pose slightly and exported as an OBJ file. If you download an animation from Mixamo, you would check the animation box when exporting. You can also find the texture files here and export those too. In Element, import the model or sequence, check normalize size if it appears too small, and apply any textures. We change the saturation as well as increased reflectivity and specular, then change the auxiliary animation to channel 1. Back in After Effects, we will move the layer up a bit to add enough room for the electricity. To add a flowing motion to the character material under the aux channels where we add it to channel 1, you can keyframe the UV offset and change the value to have it move over the model throughout the shot. Another thing we've shown before in our Godzilla episode is how to use Element Deform options to add a little bit of animation to a model. Changing these settings will wrap the model in different ways. For our model, changing the values to these settings and keyframing a few to change over time added some movement to the arms. Using a curves effects will boost the brightness, lower the red, and increase the blue for that cool electric color. Keep in mind this will be out of focus and under some glow effects once it's complete. The electricity in this shot is flowing toward Electro and flickering. In our electric pack, we have a few assets which could work for this, but we went with Strand 5 for most of them. This asset is 8 seconds long, giving us enough room to use duplicates and move them out of sync in the timeline to not look like copies, but still have the same style and speed. We'll be using the version without glow, but for anyone who has the glow version, you can try getting a similar look by tinting black and white, then crushing the contrast to lower the glow visibility. Place the first one below the Electro layer and set the blending mode to screen. Change scale, position, and rotation to angle toward Electro. Moving the anchor points to the origin means you can scale and rotate from this point. Duplicate and move in the timeline, then change position and rotation. We did this multiple times to match the look of the original shot and having them all aimed toward Electro, giving us this. If you want some other electric shapes and patterns, you can also use some of the arc assets or warp strand assets using mesh warp or turbulent displacement. For the flickering, you can keyframe the opacity of the electricity layers to appear on and off, or add a wiggle expression like this to add a random flicker. We opted with manual keyframing till we got this. As an alternative, you could use any of the strikes 1 through 10 assets in the strikes folder instead, which have built-in flashes. For the color, we added an adjustment layer above the assets and used a tint to make them black and white, and a curves effect to add contrast. Then another to lower the blue channel and boost the red, giving that warm Electro color. To add extra motion within the strands, you can use a solid layer above with a fractal noise effect applied. Increase the contrast and setting the layer blending mode to overlay, alt-click the stopwatch for evolution, and type in the expression such as time asterisk, which is times 400, to get a continuous cycle. Move the offset to the top of frame and keyframe the scale to decrease over time, which gives the impression of it flowing toward Electro. Creating the rest of the scene was actually easier than we thought it would be. In a new comp, we comped a sky for the background using a stock photo, changing the color to a darker bluer tone. Then we used a new Element solid layer with 2 electrical tower models placed away from each other and created a camera to frame up the shot. Some simple shape layer lines with light sweep with fractal noise effects like we showed in our Spider-Man web episode last week worked well for the tower cables Electro floats between. Next, we added another Element solid above these layers with some tree models. For some of them, we changed the diffuse color to orange for autumn leaves, and we have these trees on a separate layer so that we can add some subtle turbulent displacement without affecting the towers. Use a low size and amount and add a time expression to the evolution to create a constant movement throughout the shot, helping break up that static look. When these are all out of focus, it's going to work well enough to give a look of rustling leaves. Now we can drop in our electro comp, set the layer blending mode to screen, then scale and position how we want him in the scene. To add a subtle floating down motion, you can use a mesh warp effect with a load number of rows and columns and keyframe the distortion to have electro start a bit higher, then over time lowers to that original position. We have more to do, but before we get to that, I do want to thank today's sponsor, which is Envato. And whether you're doing a YouTube show like ours, any kind of event video, filmmaking work, effects, whatever it is, at any level, you need assets fast and you don't always have the time or money or know how to get them. And that's when Envato comes in, which we've been using for over 5 years. With their subscription, we get all kinds of music, sound effects, VFX assets, graphics assets, fonts, and so on. They have a template for just about everything, including social media images. It's definitely the thing that we use the most for our show as far as assets go, and they have amazing graphics assets and overlays that we can use quickly. A lot of the promos that we did for the new products we released this past Black Friday are great examples of that, or special segment elements that we needed for the show over the past few years. And it's all unlimited downloads with 53 million plus assets, and this is true unlimited downloads with a very simple licensing with their lifetime commercial license. So you can use it knowing that it's good for your personal and commercial work. So if you're like us and you're constantly needing solid assets, jump into the notes and follow the link to get 70% off your first month. Jumping right back in, we're going to create some After Effects lights and place them around the scene to simulate light coming from electro, hitting different areas of the 3D models. And for the trees, we enabled element shadow and ambient occlusion. We also used curves and color effects on each element layer to add contrast and make the colors pop. On a new adjustment layer above, use a glow effect on your choice, then duplicate the layer multiple times, changing the settings. With some, we masked to only the electro area, and with the top layer, we tinted the glow toward blue and added a wiggle expression to layer opacity to add to that flicker like we see in the original. With opacity selected, go up to animation, keyframe assistant, convert expression to keyframe, and copy them. On the trees, we added a new curves effect with boosted brightness, and the effect opacity, paste the keyframes we copied from the glow layer to make the bright curves effect increase and decrease in strength to match the glow flicker. Then we copy and pasted this curves effect to the tower layer too. We made a final element layer above everything using this Iron Spider-Man model that we got from Turbo Squid and used Mixamo to add an idle animation to him. We tried a facing forward idle position to closer match the original shot, but ended up with this standing idle animation, which we thought looked like a cool pose. We did have to do quite a bit to get the model working for the way that we wanted to use it, but overall we thought it ended up having a great look. To closer match the original scene, even though it is a different suit, we desaturated any red and blue in the costume textures to create a black and gold suit version and increased reflectivity to add more visual details. Changing the environment map can help with this too. We added some extra lights aimed at Spider-Man to act as an edge light and used elements built-in lights and environment rotation settings to add further detail. We also enabled ambient occlusion and again used curves to add contrast and alter the color slightly. To blur the background, we created an adjustment layer beneath Spider-Man and used a camera lens blur effect, which works better than other blurs as it creates some bokeh. And on the Spider-Man layer, we used depth of field with the element and After Effects camera so that his arms were out of focus. Then a few final glow effects over everything, a subtle camera wiggle, and a final grade complete the look. And if you want to change the color of electro or the electricity, just jump into that pre-comp and change the curve settings. It can be fun to play around with colors or swap out the assets to get different looks. Just remember to also change any After Effects light or glow colors to match. Our electro floating shots have quite a different look to this first one. We see him emitting electricity outward in different directions rather than it floating toward him. To achieve this kind of look, we have a new setup here. Like before, we have the same sky stock photo just without the blue tone this time, and we comped in a city skyline photo too. We used the same element towers, then a new element layer with some scaffolding models. The electro model is still Ellie from Mixamo, but this time time with an altered version of the treading water animation with some warm After Effects lights placed around the comp. Again, these scene setups are just examples, but can work similarly if you are using footage. Strikes 24 through 34 all have an outward flowing motion and can work well for recreating the electro effects. Drop one of the assets into your comp, set the blending mode to screen, and make it a 3D layer. If you have any 3D lights in your scene, they will affect 3D layers too, so make sure to switch off accepting lights and shadows. Move the anchor point to the origin, then change position, scale, and rotation to your liking. Again, tint black and white, use a curves effect to add a warm color, and then a glow. Now duplicate the layer a bunch of times, rotating each one to have them emit in different directions, then move them throughout the timeline so that they emit at different points in time. With a layer selected, you can hold down the Alt key while dragging and dropping another asset on top of the layer to replace it. This lets you swap out assets with others and maintain all effects and placements in the scene. Now we have different strike assets emitting from him throughout the shot. And if you want something really quick, we actually have these spread assets which already have multiple strikes emitting from the center. You can use one of these instead of the individual assets if you wanted for a quicker result. There's a few different ones we thought would work well for an electro look, such as spread 3, spread 4, and spread 7. We opted to use the spread 3 asset as a 3D layer placed over his chest and masked to just this area. Lastly, we keyframed the 3D light's intensity to flicker, matching the timing of the electric effects, as well as placed some layers of smoke stock footage in 3D space tinted to a warm color and with keyframed opacity to appear more visibly during the bright flickers. Layers of glow effects, camera shake, and a grade like before complete the look. And these are just some examples. Like we showed earlier, changing colors or swapping out assets can inspire different looks and designs if you want something more unique for your own project. And you can try out recreating other electro shots too, such as teleporting and beams. We were able to match this beam effect pretty quickly just by using our Strikes 43 and 44 assets. And you can also create a similar electric mask to electros by using the end of strand 10 masked out, duplicated, and comped together to create that shape. But that is it for today. If you are interested in the pack that we used today, our electric pack, you can find that in the links below. We're giving it to you guys for 40% off, and we're going to leave it 40% off for the rest of December. That is it for today, and until next time, don't forget to write, shoot, edit, repeat.